please join us. Mr. Calhoun, can you lead us?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can we start with the roll call for the Camarillo Airport?
Supervisor Long.
Here.
Supervisor Zaragoza. Here. Councilmember Craven.
Here.
Councilmember Molche.
Here.
Bill Thomas.
Here.
Alternate Public Member Michael Hodson. Here. Alternate City Council Member Santangelo.
Present.
Camarillo has a quorum.
Thank you very much.
For Oxnard Airport Authority, Supervisor Long.
Yes?
Supervisor Zaragoza. Here. Mayor Flynn. Councilmember Perallo.
Here.
Public Member Walter Calhoun. Here. Alternate Public Member Eugene Fussell. Here. Oxnard has a quorum.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And welcome all new board members. Really appreciate you being here tonight. Thank you very much. Next item is the approval of the minutes for the Oxnard Authority.
Do we have a motion?
Yes.
We got a motion and a second to approve.
Okay, there's
All in favor?
aye.
So we're approved in the Oxnard.
Wonderful. And also for the Camarillo, August 9th, I need to get a motion.
I move approval.
And can I get a second? Well, I'll make the second since you guys weren't here. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any noes? That's been approved. The next item is public comments. We have many cards here. Our comments will be limited to the maximum of 3 minutes per item. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have 9 speakers today, so we will hold them to 3 minutes. Our first item is Andy Risk. And if we can ask for, just to make sure everyone knows, since we have the new board, that we are not supposed to be making any comments on the comments that are said here today, but it's our time to hear from the public. So with that, thank you, Andy.
I have a lot to read, so I'm going to read really quickly.
Turn on his mic.
Oh, hold on 1 second. Restart, please. Thank you. I just want to make sure your microphone's on.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Hi, my name is Andrew Risk. I'm here to inform you of a disturbing situation where the acting director of airports has evicted me on 2 of my county rental hangars at Camarillo Airport. I've been a tenant at the Camarillo Airport since 1991. I've either rented tie-downs or hangars for the last 27 years without any problems. I currently own 3 airplanes that I keep at Hangar 223 and 224. My family and I use these airplanes as a hobby and as means of transportation to get my family safely to and from our Arizona house where we go for weekends and holidays. Today, I'm a pilot for United Airlines flying the 787. On November 27th, I received paperwork indicating that I have lost all access to the airport because I was unsafe and because of unsafe and unstandard service provider, and that I continue to do maintenance on the airport premises without permission. This is false and a flat-out lie. The acting director knew that I had shut down my business as Camarillo Avionics Incorporated and was doing contract work on a limited basis for other shops on the airfield. I was given an approval by Jorge himself on the telephone. There is another person that's going to speak this afternoon that also received an oral permission from Jorge that it was okay for me to work for his business. I asked when I got the paperwork, I called and said, hey, what's going on? And he says he's acting on his undue needed for being kicked out of the hangars. So he didn't have to have a reason. I said, well, what's going on? 4 days later, when I got back into town, I got paperwork that showed that I was, because of maintenance that I had been performing after I gave up my permit, which was not true. So I called all my customers. They all wrote letters. I called all the maintenance shops. They all wrote letters. I turned that information over to the acting department of airports. So he had all the evidence from me showing that I wasn't doing maintenance on the airport anymore. Yet he still said, I don't care, you're out. it's already done. I said, well, I would like an opportunity to meet with the boards to show my evidence. And he says, it wasn't up to them, it was up to him to kick me out of the hangars. I've been harassed for weeks and weeks. I've got other people that are going to be testifying of them driving by, taking pictures. There's a pamphlet that I handed out to all of you. There's pictures of me in a hangar with a friend. Flip the page, he wrote a letter. He was doing maintenance on his airplane. I was just there associating with him. There was no transfer of money at that time at all. What I would like to do is, I believe that everything that has been brought against me is completely false. I would be happy to answer any questions. It's just I got 3 minutes to go over all this stuff. But everything that he has said is false. I've proven it to him, and he's still continuing to lead you guys with false pretenses that I've done anything wrong. Do you guys have any questions for me at this time?
Thank you.
No one.
Like I said before, it's public comment time. This is where we listen to the public. It is not ours to be asking all sorts of questions, but we will be touching about that later. Next item is Steve Weiss.
Supervisor Long, he's the commission member, and he'll speak on item 6B.
Oh, okay, sorry, it wasn't on here saying 6B. Apologize. Thank you. David Chrisman?
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak to the board. My name is David Chrisman. My family and I have been Camarillo residents for the past 14 years. I'm a veteran fire captain for the Los Angeles County Fire Department, where I have been employed for the past 34 years. I met Andrew Risk through a mutual church affiliation where he has become a friend, and through our friendship, he has become a mentor in aviation. He helped me locate and guided me through the purchase of a Cessna 172 last December. On Tuesday, November 6, 2018, at approximately 1200 hours, I was visiting Andy Risk at his hangars at the Camarillo Airport. I noticed a county airport operations SUV with a number 7 displayed on the vehicle drive past Andy and I several times. On one pass of the vehicle, I noticed one of the 2 occupants photographing Andy and I. I asked Andy what this was about, and he explained to me that this was the type of harassment he was encountering on a regular basis. As a civil servant for over 3 decades, I have never seen such unprofessional and harassing behavior displayed by a public servant. The County of Ventura's mission statement declares ethical treatment at the top of the list of values to build and foster public trust. Clearly, the mission was not accomplished on November 6, 2018. That concludes my statement. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, Rick Rolson.
Good evening, I'm Rick Rusin. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm here on behalf of Andy Risk as well. I met Andy in 2011 when I relocated my airplane from Van Nuys to Camarillo Airport. He became my A&P at that point and was the best mechanic I ever worked with in my entire life since I've been flying for 30 years. He took excellent care of me, and we became friends as well. And in May, he gave me the bad news. May of 2018, he said, I'm closing my business down, and I'm going to have to refer you to another A&P, which was a very sad day in my life because I really liked the way he was taking care of me and my airplanes. But Andy and I stayed friends, and we're still friends today. He is also a pilot for me. He flies my airplanes on a regular basis. He flies them for business for me, pleasure for me. He may carry some of my relatives or some of my employees to go places, or even just ferrying an airplane for me to get someplace else that I want to pick it up at. So when I heard about what had happened to him and he was being accused of conducting business after the fact that he had shut down and given up his permit, I'm here to testify that as one of his main customers, he wouldn't work on my airplanes anymore, even though I begged him to. He turned me over to Brett at BL Aviation, who I've been working with ever since. And what really saddens me most is that he's been banned from the airport. I don't know how somebody gets banned from public property before anything has been proven that he's done something wrong, supposedly. So I'm here today to support him and to ask you guys to at least lift this ban of him not being able to enter the airport without being threatened to be arrested. He can't go to his own hangar, he can't visit his friends, he can't fly, and it seems utterly ridiculous. He's a fine man and he hasn't done anything wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. Brett Lee?
How you doing? I'm Brett Lee. I'm owner-operator of BL Aviation. I've known Andy for many years, and I was lucky enough to receive some of his customers. I'm here to speak on his behalf that in May, I did get in contact with several of his customers, and he had referred them to me, and I started working with them. I also use Andy for contract labor, okay, because with aircraft, you're not going to have everyone on the field to maintain different types of aircraft. Of different type of aircraft or the systems that's in there. So you're constantly going to different airports and different facilities to get the repairs done in a quality manner. I use him. There was a situation with him out on my ramp working on a 206. I walked out there and was told to go back in the hangar. There was a confrontation. That seemed to be straightened out. Everyone came back to the hangar a little later, discussed it. It was good. They understood that he was working for me. A couple days later, I sat with Bill Bird, the guy who I'm buying the hangar from, with Jorge, and I explained to him that I also did use Andy for contract labor. Both those times, it seemed like everything had been settled. There was no issue with him working on the airport through me or through other facilities because he is licensed to do the pedostatic transponder checks, which requires a repair station license to do so. On that fact, yeah, I don't know why he is banned, and I don't know why he's being accused of something that hasn't been done. And that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Scott Stearns?
Thanks for giving us the opportunity to speak to you. I'd also like to speak in support of Andy Risk. I'm one of the people that was photographed in my privately owned hangar by the airport operations personnel, I believe, which I think is a little bit ridiculous. I think it's outside the scope of the job of the airport operations personnel to be photographing us in our hangars. I've known Andy for 25 years. We've flown at 2 different airlines together. Our fathers flew at the same airline. We were having a social visit in my hangar, talking about what we always talk about, which is airplanes. And we were photographed secretly, clandestinely by the airport operations people. I also believe that Andy, should have his access to the airport restored. We are innocent until we're proven guilty, and until the situation's sorted out, I don't see why Andy should be restricted from his property and his access to the airport. I think at the core of this issue is the excessively high fees charged for a permit to offer services at the airport. For example, I have the equipment to do propeller balancing of the engine, the propeller after it's installed on the engine. I'm also a licensed mechanic. I bought the equipment with the idea that I would offer those services at the airport, and a large part of the reason why I don't is because of the extremely high fees charged by the airport for what would be a very part-time business. And I believe that's at the core of the issues Andy's having as well. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Next up is Joseph Leishman.
Good evening. My name is Joe Leckman. I'm an attorney here in town. I've been here for 27 years. And I don't really know Andy, so I'm not here to defend what he's doing. I'm here to just make sure that everybody's access and rights to the airport are respected. I do know a little bit about the law in my almost 30 years of practice, and it seems like the Department of Airports thinks they're above the law. If a landlord feels like there's a breach of the lease, they can't just do self-help and throw the tenant out. We have a whole set of civil code sections that apply to potential lease violations. If there's a violation of a lease, you can't just lock the tenant out. You have to give them a 3-day notice. If they haven't paid rent, you can't just go lock the doors, turn off their gate pass, and not allow them. You have to give them a 3-day notice to pay or quit. In this case, I understand that Andy isn't in default of payment of rent. They're alleging some other violation. You similarly have to give a 3-day notice of the violation. And as long as the person cures it within 3 days, the lease termination is nullified. It's all set forth in California's Code Section 1161. So for basically one person at the airport to be able to unilaterally become the judge, the jury, and the executioner, and without any sort of review, administrative, judicial, et cetera, for him to be able to turn off his gate code or his gate pass and lock him out of his airport is just blatantly unfair. You know, a couple hundred years ago when this country was established, our founding fathers knew that sometimes power corrupts people and that sometimes governments run amok. So they established a guaranteed set of rights for all citizens that were carved in stone. It's known as our Constitution. One section, Section 1 of the 14th Amendment to our Constitution, states as follows: "Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws." Where is the protection of our citizens when one person can lock that person out without any review? Andy's being deprived of life, liberty, and his property without due process. I mean, is he a criminal? Is there evidence that he's a safety risk? There's none of that. There's no reason to lock him out. If the airport authority thinks Andy or anybody else has done anything wrong, they need to follow the rules. They need to send him a 3-day notice that specifically says what the violation is, and if he doesn't comply, they go to court and have an independent judicial review where he can be determined whether he's liable or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Michael Lynn.
Good evening. I'm here to speak on behalf of CFI, Camarillo Flight Instruction, and Andy Risk. Been doing business at the airport here for about 10 years in spite of a lot of difficulty working with Camarillo Airport and its management. The most recent situation that's pretty disturbing is that around May of 2018, Andy advised me, who's been doing our pedostatic inspections, that he's closed down his business. I told him that I think we had 3 aircraft at the time that needed pedostatic inspections to get them done, and he said that if I was added Andy to our insurance certificate as an independent contractor, he can continue working on our aircraft, and that he would. I went ahead and paid him. He'll be getting a 1099 for the work he did in 2018. Late November, early December, I was called by Andy and told that he was under investigation for some of the activities at the airport, including his work on my aircraft. It was not but a few days later that airport security entered our offices and demanded to see the logbooks and take photocopies. Didn't put it as a request, but said it was a requirement. I didn't hear about this until after it had already occurred. I had called Jorge and spoke with him because I was pretty disturbed by the fact that they would come in there and having demanded the copies of the logbooks. The only government entity that has the rights to come in and look at our logbooks is the FAA, and we also make it available for our customers. I explained to Jorge that he was more than welcome to call me up and advise me that, hey, I've got a question about this Andy Risk person. Did you work with him, and is it possible I can see your logbooks? And I explained to Jorge that I would have made that available, and I would have also probably saved all of us a lot of trouble. And as I understand it, 3 lawsuits currently pending, and advised Jorge that we are working with Andy, and we continue to want to work with Andy as an independent contractor for our business to keep our flight school going. As far as that's concerned, that conversation with Jorge ended with Jorge advising me that our lease with CAF and the CF building is a month-to-month lease, and that I should be aware of that. I want to go ahead and go on record with everyone here that this is terrible, and the management here at the airport is not going the direction that it should be going. Thanks.
Thank you. Next is Dennis Kennedy.
You know, as I sitting here and I'm thinking back to that Christmas movie, I think with Jimmy Stewart, It's a Wonderful Life, I think, or something like that. And I'm just thinking, a lot of people here, I think, could think back, what would it have been if Andy hadn't been here to bail him out of this or that, or keep the airplanes aloft? I know there's been times when I would talk to Andy early in the morning, and he'd say, well, I just got home at 3. I said, what were you doing? He said, well, I had to finish up a job, you know, to get something done for someone, at the expense of his health, I might add. But I've known Andy since he was a teenager, and I've watched him grow. I've watched him work hard to get himself through college, to get his ratings, get a job in aviation. The bottom line being that Andy loves airplanes, he loves aviation. And when he's out at the airport, he's very happy. It's just like his second home. And to be taken away from him, it's like a divorce. He's miserable, he hasn't slept, and I just, as others had said, if we could just get this thing wrapped up, let Andy back to what he loves. Andy, as far as his character, I've known him so long that I just know that his character is something that's, well, you just can't really fault it. He's a very, very dedicated father. I've never seen anybody that wants to have his kids involved and be with them and give up his time. So that's why I'm up here. I'm not going to repeat what everybody else has said as far as what they've done or what he's done with them and working for them. I'm more interested that you know a little bit about Andy. And I appreciate listening to me. And if Andy wants to use some of my time, feel free. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is David Timms.
Well, good evening, members of the authority. My name is David Timms. I have a hangar at the airport here. I have an aircraft at the airport, and I've been operating out of this airport for about over 20 years. As far as I can determine, Andy is in no violation of his lease agreement. He's been evicted from the airport, and I'm not aware that he was ever given a notice to comply or quit. I see that he's been denied his due process for the law, and being locked out without a court order is kind of strange to me. I don't know how they can do that. And I don't know there's any violation of his lease agreement. As far as I can see, he's a well-recognized person on the airport, complying with his lease agreement. And I don't believe there's any basis for being locked out. I don't see any cause to his being locked out. I would ask this authority to rescind the eviction and allow Andy access to the airport. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, this is the, there's no more speakers? Okay. How do we move forward there's a very strong sense in this room in regards to this. I know I'm not allowed to really say anything, so we have legal counsel here. If you could say a couple words.
So we will have legal counsel say a few words about this.
Good evening. My name is Thomas Temple. I'm an assistant county counsel. Is it on?
Yeah.
Currently representing the county in 2 lawsuits filed by Mr. Risk. There's a 3rd lawsuit that the county has filed today using outside counsel to remove Mr. Risk from his 2 hangars at the Camarillo Airport. Mr. Risk has chosen litigation as the method to contest the county's actions, and we would ask and explain that the county's position is that Mr. Risk ought to be able to use that forum that he's chosen. So the county won't be commenting on any of the facts relating to underlying the lawsuits. That'll all be hashed out in court, as Mr. Risk has chosen.
Thank you very much. Could I ask, since I am legally bound to not comment on any of the items, can I ask for at the next meeting that we review the month-to-month lease and what is the process? I think we need to understand that as a commission.
Yes, we would be happy to bring that back and explain to you how the process would work on a termination of month-to-month leases.
Okay. And my next thing is to ask at another time that we review the fees charged. I think we need to review that. I would like to understand so that when we are asked questions, I can be better educated on those items.
We can do that too. Just to give you a little bit of background, though on the fees, it is something that we base on cost recovery analysis. And typically what happens is with mobile mechanics, they do make a living working at the airfield, but the businesses that pay us leases, they also have to provide us with substantial capital investment at the airport. So it is a balance that we're trying to maintain between all of the players at the airport to make it fair for everybody.
Yes.
Tom, you know, and I, just for information, this is items not in the agenda.
Right.
And normally we cannot take any action because this item's not in the agenda. And the other concern that I have, and I'm sure that Mr. Risk has, you know, his concerns is that. Microphone. Can you hear me?
No, it's not on. It's inside.
Let me back up a little again. This is items that are in the agenda, it's not agendized. So what I'm sorry. Okay. So anyway, what I'd like to share is that because we're under litigation, even more so that we can't comment on this item. And I'm sure there's 2 sides to every story, but I just wanted to share that with you, that I'm sure that Mr. Risk has in his concerns, and then the airport authority has other concerns. And I believe that right now, just for the sake of all the people that are here, it's an items that are not in the agenda, and we cannot continue the conversation. Is that correct, Tom?
Yes, that's what the Brown Act says. Correct.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I have a question as Oxnard Airport Authority member. I believe that somebody needs to answer this question. Who's responsible for the custody and the caretaking of the property that's kept away from this guy? Are we on the hook for it? Is it being protected currently? Is the facility open for anybody to, how's the custody being taken care of?
That's another item.
We'll have to review that at the next meeting.
I mean, that would be a month,
So if we can have
Madam
that
Chair.
information shared to us at the next meeting, we can't discuss how those things are because it's not on our agenda. And
I understand that the
Yeah.
district attorney has nailed our mayor and myself for a Brown Act violation in my city. But this kind of a thing, custody, a lot can happen in less than 24 hours. You're aware of a mechanic that lost his entire tools
Yes,
in
that
one
was-
evening. I mean, how do we make sure this doesn't happen with this property?
That's not part of the agenda.
Well, if you could follow up with us as a commission to give us that information at a later time, hopefully sooner than later, that would be wonderful. Because you're right, we do not want loss of property at all, and we want to make sure everything is contained and that is done lawfully and in the right order.
Thank you.
All right, and now,
Madam Chair, just quickly, and I realize that it's clear as a bell that we can't say anything, but I do just throw this comment in. It's, from all awkward circumstances, it appears that it's an upsetting, I know Mr. Risk, I'll say that right off the bat, and it's an upsetting situation, and I know everyone up here is very concerned about it. I don't know what's right, what's wrong, or what occurred. It is kind of unfortunate that the lawsuits were filed. So because I, for one, would like to know a little bit more about exactly what's going on. So having said that, I would like to just make this a matter of record that I would like to be kept abreast in the future of exactly what the situation is. If the lawsuit situation changes and they're retracted or what have you, and there is something, or we could learn something and help Mr. Risk, and if at all possible, then we would certainly like to do so. And it's unfortunate that we can.
Thank you. Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
The last comment is that, or just an idea for the staff is that, I mean, obviously the county council has made clear what has transpired, you know, talking about the facts rather than opinions. And naturally, as elected officials, we're here to hear members of the public speak on items that are not on the agenda. And Councilman Perello here just mentioned the fact that, you know, there's a 50-year-old law here in the state of California that if something's not agendized, that the legislative body cannot comment on it because it would be a violation of California state law. So that's just to make that very clear, which I think was made clear in many ways. But I would always say that without commenting on, this is the first time I've heard this, just to simply say, I hope that it can be resolved outside of legal options.
Right. Thank you. Moving on to, are there any unfinished business?
None.
Okay. Now we are moving on to new business. First item is the selection of the chair and vice chair of the calendar year. I would like to suggest that we postpone Camarillo's vote till next meeting. The reason being is I would like to ask for us to be reviewing our bylaws. We need to update those bylaws. And until we update those bylaws based on the switch of who would now be chair and vice chair, we need to review those. Does anyone have I explained myself on that situation?
Let me ask, you said you needed to change the bylaws. I'm wondering how the bylaws are going to get changed by the next meeting.
No, thank you. Okay, so the situation is that the chair position is supposed to move on to our member of the public. And at this time, our member of the public has been, is at its max of time frame. So they've been they're supposed to serve two terms and so forth. So we need to address that item before we can vote our commissioner in. The rotation is that it's supposed to go from the county to the public position to the city position. And currently right now, we need to make sure that our bylaws are uniform. Also to Oxnard, I think would be appropriate as well. So if we could postpone it for 1 month, that's what I'm asking for us to do. There's a question over there?
What is the
microphone?
Yeah, Mike needs a mic.
Mike needs a mic.
So my question is, what is the process to revise the bylaws? Is there a committee or has to be some kind of a, I don't know what the process is, and when will that occur?
Read them, the bylaws can be revised or are revised by the authority members themselves. It doesn't have to go outside the authority. Okay. So I would suggest that both authorities need to take a look at the bylaws and maybe have a short meeting sometime off cycle for discussion on bylaws, and I don't know the exact appropriate way of doing that because it's, again, you probably have a subset of the authority so that you're not involved in Brown Act issues.
Well, we might have to make a special meeting for it.
That would be fine. It would have to be a public meeting in order not to violate the Brown Act, I believe. But the staff can put forward some recommendations based on experience that we've seen at other airports and provide those to you, and you can move forward with the recommendation or not.
Correct. So that would be for the Camarillo, would be that we would postpone this to the next month and that we would come back with the bylaws. if everyone is approval of that.
Yeah, I don't know what,
Okay, I don't think we need to have a vote for it because nothing,
I want to bring him in line.
or do we?
I believe it's an agendized item, so you probably need a vote.
All right, so I need a motion to postpone the elections till the next meeting and for the Camarillo, and to come back with the bylaws. Can I get a motion?
I move that we do the motion as stated.
Thank you.
I'll second.
All right, any further questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any noes, abstention? Motion has been approved. Thank you. Now turning it over to Oxnard.
we could go forward as essentially planned. I think Mr. Zaragoza is going to be the president. Oh, I'm sorry. How about now?
Button here.
It's on, isn't it?
It's on, he just wasn't speaking into it.
There you go.
How about now? Hear me?
Go ahead.
Well, anyhow, it's up to the guys here if you want to proceed this evening and keep things in the normal cycle, or postpone and chit chat about it next month. It's your choice, frankly. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, so my understanding is that we have some concerns regarding the term limits, regarding whether the term limit should be 2 terms and appointed by the board, and also that we've had individuals that have been working without those conditions, without understanding how many years and so forth. Is that what we're looking at?
In reviewing the bylaws primarily say that they need to meet the joint powers agreements. So they need to be specific to each of the joint powers agreements with each specific city. For the city of Oxnard, there are no term limits for the public member. For Camarillo, there are term limits. I believe the intention of your bodies is to make it consistent so that we don't run into situations like this in the future. There's also the topic of compensation to those who attend, so we'll be looking at that also. And then the other one that is not addressed in the bylaws is the conflict of interest for the public members, more specifically, and also the fair political practices that should be included in typically bylaws that elected officials or appointed officials have.
So Oxnard right now has no term limits?
Correct.
So you're looking at equity, you're looking at...
we will be reviewing those, and that's what we're looking for.
So I'm not sure if our staff, our board likes to weigh in on that.
Yes. I want to thank a member of the Camarillo report for pointing out something to me and looking into it. And I want to thank Anna for getting me the copies of the bylaws. I hope that everybody gets a opportunity to read both sets of bylaws. If we operate as a Ventura County Airport Authority, I don't understand why there's not a consistency in the term limits and the compensation.
For the public member, right.
For anybody that takes the time to spend the time, read the material, and sit up here. I get paid $50 for coming to this meeting, and I'm finding out there's people here that don't get a dime, not even a cup of coffee or a parking place, compensation for gas. I don't believe that's right. Separation of church and state's one thing, discrimination against men and women's another thing, compensation difference, discrepancies between elected officials and public members, serving at the same place, same time, doing the same job is wrong. We either all get it or we don't get it. So when we discuss this, I hope this comes up. I didn't know this till Monday night. And the term limit thing, county council, I would expect that county council would hold us to the fire if we're violating the term limits, because letting us stumble through the dark without county council weighing in and paying attention to what's going on, I would request that you address who do we hold accountable for not letting us get up breaking the rules. If you could address that, please.
My office does not represent this body. I know that there has been some discussion about which attorney and which entity's attorney, whether it's the city's attorney, a county's attorney, or an outside attorney, could represent this body. But this body was created as part of a joint powers agreement. The joint powers exercised under that agreement do not create a public entity, unlike other joint powers agreements that can do so. And so there is no, at this time, basis for the authorities to hire counsel. That's not to say that my office doesn't help. Obviously, we advise the Department of Airports any legal question that comes up, and I think this would probably cover 99.9% of the situations that the authorities would encounter can be brought up via staff, and staff can ask my office's opinion. So I've discussed this issue with Leroy Smith, my number 2, Michael Walker, and we all seem to be on the same page that because of the way the authority is set up, it being an entity of the city of Camarillo and the county of Ventura, plus a public member, it's not crystal clear as to exactly how you would get legal counsel if in fact you needed different.
Well, I greatly appreciate which information you've given me, because I've learned something else tonight, that you're sitting here as the legal representative. You're not representing this board, and we just had public comment where there's discussion of lawsuits, and there, Monday night there was an issue here, and I believe you were the same individual who was there Monday night, correct?
Correct, yeah.
And you're here tonight, and you represent the county, but you don't represent this airport authority?
Could I ask a question?
Hold on 1 second.
Oh,
I'd like to ask you a question. If someone brings legal action against the airport authority, who would represent us?
Well, the airport authority is not a public entity. It either has power to sue or to be sued. So if somebody were to file a lawsuit naming the authority as a defendant, that would be improper in the first place.
I thought that anybody could sue anybody at any time for anything. And if that is the case, you know, we're really in a bad position.
That's not the case. It's very common for plaintiffs to bring lawsuits against things that they believe are public entities. For example, a lawsuit was recently filed against the Ventura County Jail. That's not a public entity. That's not a recognized body. That individual that filed that lawsuit may have meant the sheriff's department who operates the jail, but that was never clarified. So we run into that situation all the time. If somebody were to sue the Department of Airports, for example, the Department of Airports is not an entity that can be sued. The county of Ventura can be sued. So these are details, I think, for lawyers to argue about, but for the most part, the authority is not a proper defendant. That's not to say that a plaintiff couldn't sue the authority or try to sue the authority, but generally speaking, what that individual is going to be complaining about is probably going to be actions by the county's Department of Airports, right, because that's the lion's share of the work is done there. It could possibly be an action by the city of Camarillo, depending on what we're talking about. So that could be hashed out. So to answer your question most directly, if a lawsuit like that did come in, my office and probably the city attorney for the city of Camarillo would look at what is actually being alleged and determine at that point who is the most likely proper defendant, and that could be hashed out at that point. Does that answer your question?
There was one more here, and then Craven. Ms. Crazy.
Thanks, Shane. I appreciate your remarks, and especially yours. Although, as far as any inequities are concerned, and I can safely say this because I've been here for over 30 years, it's always been a labor of love, you know, number one. And if that's not the case, you shouldn't be here. And you have to be interested in what you're doing. In fact, one of the criteria over 30 years ago, and incidentally, and the public member back then was appointed by for that district. And periodically, not necessarily every 2 years, but Oxnard has taken on the record the time to review my actions, I guess for lack of a better term, and say, well, let's keep him around a little while longer. We can probably milk a little bit more out of him. So, and I've been happy doing that, and I love this organization and what it stands for. But it's just strictly a labor of love, and the original concept was, at least back when I was appointed, was that the public member represent a segment of the community that knows a little bit about flying. Now, it's nothing written in stone, but it was helpful, and I knew something about flying back then, and hopefully I still do. And to have that kind of wisdom available for the use of the other members and the experience level that I had at that time has been very, very useful, I can tell you that. And simply to put this position out to just anybody that wants to have their opinion heard would be a huge mistake. And so just to finalize it, sorry it takes so much time, but it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be legally onerous. It's just and I know the Camarillo public member has been reviewed in the same fashion. It's just an ongoing tradition where their actions were reviewed, and it hasn't really been a big issue to date, so I hope that it doesn't become one.
Commissioner Craven.
Well, this doesn't really have anything to do with selecting a chair or a vice chair for the Oxnard Airport Authority. But it's my understanding that this board really can't make any decisions other than to make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. Is that correct?
Yes.
So there's nothing to sue us on because we're not a final decision-making body.
Right, and the feeling of this commission is to ensure that the suggestions that we are bringing to the Board of Supervisors is legitimate, is legal, and so that is why we've been asking for legal counsel on many of the different items, is to ensure that we review the bylaws, that they're up to date, that our commissioners are following the guidelines that were set in the bylaws, and that is why we'd like to get them reviewed. So back to Oxnard.
To conclude that matter, Oxnard has elected to wait 1 month to take action along with Camarillo.
And I'll second the motion.
May I make one more comment? Thank you, chairs, both chairs. Reading the difference, one of the discrepancies between Oxnard and Camarillo, right out of the Oxnard bylaws, compensation, Article 5, compensation for the members of the authority may be compensated in an amount of not more than $50 per meeting for a maximum of 2 meetings any given month. Such compensation shall be provided by the respective entities, with the compensation for the public member being shared equally by both entities. So why are the elected officials for Oxnard paid, but the public ones aren't? They call that something else somewhere else. We don't want to talk about that now, but
Well,
I
in
appreciate that.
clarification, the county supervisors do not get paid
Okay, well, the
extra
two
for this.
council members.
So this will be reviewed. I think it's totally appropriate that you state that.
That's part of the review that we're looking to do.
Yes, but we do need a motion and a second. And did you vote yet?
Yes, we did.
All in favor?
We're all in favor.
All right, we're all in favor. There are no noes or abstentions. Okay.
Thank you.
Moving on to Oxnard. We have item B, and we do have one speaker here.
Well, you do so good. Why change it?
All right. It's approval of an authorization of the Director of Airports to execute a lease amendment agreement with the SBA 2012 TC Assets for the tower location for cellular equipment at Oxnard Airport for a renewal of 5 years.
Yes, I wanted to bring this item forward. It has to do with a cell site for, obviously, cell phone service at the Oxnard Airport, at the airport beacon. And Madeline Hurley, our lease manager, did a fantastic job, I think, in negotiating this lease, and she's going to explain it.
Good evening, authority members. My name is Madeline Hurley. I'm the lease manager for the Department of Airports, and this particular site is currently under a lease that will expire at the end of 2020. It was a 20-year lease with all options. Initially started as a 5-year with 3 5-year options, with fixed rent increases every 5 years. Currently, SBA is a holding company that then sublets space on the antenna to, or on the beacon, excuse me, in the tower structure to 2 different users, AT&T and Sprint. And they also have a small equipment shed at the base of the tower where their equipment is held. Their lease doesn't come up till 2020, but they like to negotiate far in advance of the expiration so that they can secure their sub-agreements with their users. To that end, we did a broad survey of other airports and the local area for cell site agreements and recent renewal rates. And currently, the one that we were looking at that's closest to us would be a county agreement for a Simi Valley Park tower, which was a single tower, which was renewed, I think it was with Verizon for approximately $3,200 a month. So we reached agreement with SBA for a renewal rate of $3,000 a month for the first 5 years. And then if they exercise their options, 3 additional 5-year options, each time the rent would increase 20%. Right now, we're in the last 5-year period of this 20-year initial agreement, and so the rates having been negotiated 20 years ago, currently they're only paying $1,490 a month. So there's quite an adjustment coming forward, which reflects market rates. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Any questions from the Oxnard?
Gentlemen, go ahead.
appreciate the information. Being this is a totally different amendment, totally new from what the original project was there any thought to go out for a bid or put this out for requests for proposals by any other opportunities, any other entities, to give them an opportunity to jump on this?
No, this was actually, we've got another user on the airport that's T-Mobile that's attached to the tower, the operating tower. So we have 3 users out there, and no, we did not consider going out for bid.
Is there a rationale for that?
I think we were approached by the existing tenant for a renewal, early renewal, so that was the reason. And also, SBA takes care of the beacon for us, so there's a maintenance agreement associated with it.
Okay, I just, that kind of rubs me the wrong way. Thank you very much. Thank you for the answer.
If I recall, weren't they required to make some significant improvements to the beacon at their last renewal period? And they did a lot of work on it. They made it brighter and stronger. Jorge, I believe that to be the fact.
So this lease is actually one of the smaller leases at the airport. It's only about 1,500 square feet. And what they do is they occupy the land. They build a facility there for mobile tower, from mobile equipment, basically. And then where the beacon sits, that's an antenna that they are supposed to replace should they leave. And they provide maintenance to the beacon quarterly, on a quarterly basis. And every time we have an emergency, because our staff is not equipped to go up there and do high work, they do it for us, and it's been a good relationship. There's only a few companies out there, and one of the other reasons why we're actually contemplated extending this lease is because there's actually one of our tenants of a hangar. He has land, and he was trying to negotiate a lease, and he was trying to push a little bit harder on them, and he ended up losing them. They took the antenna away, and they took the equipment away, and he didn't end up getting a new tenant there.
Thanks, Jorge. I noticed there's quite a disparity in the new rate and the old. Is there a cost of living index or any kind of a monthly increase applied to this?
The existing lease didn't have a CPI at all. It was just a fixed rent increase. The T-Mobile agreement that we have at the tower does have a CPI, and currently they're paying $2,700 a month, and that kind of keeps pace in a little better fashion.
So they make up for this individual? Is that?
No, they're 2 different companies, so 2 different towers.
So the smaller company doesn't pay the increase? The monthly increase, the cost of living increase?
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
I'm just confused why there isn't a cost of living increase in this particular lease.
It's a fixed increase, so it's fixed at, if you will, 20% every 5 years, so 4% a year.
Oh, it's fixed for the period.
Leases over 5 years for us, they only see increases every 5 years per the board's policy.
Thank you.
We do have a speaker here, Steve Weiss from the AAC Commission. Thank you for being here tonight.
Good evening and Happy New Year. Our body unanimously passed the recommendation to the Board of Supervisors on this amendment as to an extension with SBA 2012. While I'm here, and I see this is the last item on the agenda, during our commissioner comments, there was concern raised that we've seen in the last few years a lack of transparency coming from the Department of Airports that concerns us, that think we could avoid snafus, et cetera, and that had to do with both the risk thing and the ongoing lease negotiation process. Any questions?
Thank you, Steve, for bringing those comments up.
Let me ask a question. Would you care to go further in depth of what you mean, your suggestion?
Well, we'd like to know what's going on
with both items
during the process rather than seeing a giant problem arise, et cetera. We're an advisory association, if you will. So, I mean, that's what we're there for. So we'd like to see the Board of Supervisors use us in a way in which we were appointed to our positions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. All right, are there any further questions from Oxnard? And we need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
There's
Second.
first and a second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Any noes? Nope. Abstention? Motion has been approved.
Thank you.
Moving on to Director's Report.
Yes. So there's a few things that I wanted to mention, and it's timely that Mr. Weiss mentioned about the hangar lease update. The staff, along with the CEO's office, has been meeting with the Ventura County Hangar Owners Association. So if you own a hangar at Camarillo, this is your update. There's gate notices that have been updated at the airport entrances that talks about this subject. I think we're getting a good conversation going. We're hoping to move something forward soon. And we're getting good input. So we obviously had a few things going on. We didn't remain stagnant, I can tell you that. We did a lot of research. We heard all of the comments from our tenants, and we have to be good stewards of the airport, and at the same time, we have to try to maintain a balance between what the tenants' interests are versus what the airport's interests are. So we're looking to move forward. We have an upcoming meeting with the Ventura County Hangar Owners Association on the 22nd of this month, and we'll keep you appraised as to what will happen then.
And is the AAC being told about all the different changes and so forth, like Steve Weiss had just requested?
Well, I got to tell you that it is a kind of a delicate situation. I mean, we provide updates as to what is it that we're doing when we come up to this office, but we were initially talking to the committee that was formed to negotiate or to talk about the lease to see what would work better for the county. But if we bring it to a forum like this, we don't want to bring something that's unfinished yet and something that probably is not going to make sense. We would like to get our facts straight and bring them over here with a recommendation, then so that the Advisory Commission and the airport authorities can support or not the recommendation that the Department of Airports wants to move forward. We don't want to bring forward a recommendation that's not finalized.
Okay.
So that's one of the topics. The other one is obviously we lost our director of airports, and it made an impact in our department. I think everybody has been strong, and we appreciated everybody coming over for the celebration of life that we had at the airport, and his family is also thankful. Now, in regards to the recruitment for the director of airports, the county is doing a nationwide search for a director. They're looking for the best candidate, obviously, and hopefully we should hear from the county within the next month or so with a selection potentially. That's obviously I work for the department, so that's at the CEO's level. I'm just giving you an update as to.
Well, and with that, just if I can add, because I keep pushing on that one, is it was posted in December. There will be a panel that goes through the recruitment period, and then they will choose a person for it. And I want to make sure that people know that it's not just one person picking this candidate. It's a nationwide, and there will be a panel that will be doing the interviews.
Question.
Yes.
It was posted in December. When did the opportunities to apply close?
I don't believe it's closed yet.
Okay.
From what I'm saying is, and I'm telling you this because I'm an applicant as well, but it's a continuous recruitment right now.
It didn't have a close.
There's not a close date on it.
Thank you.
Did you have a question?
For the authorities' knowledge, I did talk to the county CAO and did suggest that at least when they got down to the 3 or 4 candidates, that it would probably be smart for the county to have involvement from the airport authority and from the commission as far as selected groups talking with the candidates. He did not seem to be opposed to that.
No. No, Mike Powers is the person he's talking about, and that's our CEO, and he is definitely not opposed to it. He wants to make sure that the community accepts the new hire.
Transparency.
And that there's transparency.
Talking about staffing at the Department of Airports, I wanted to introduce you to our new maintenance supervisor, Byron Hamilton.
Welcome.
I'm sorry, say again
Byron Hamilton.
Byron?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Welcome.
He started with the department a long time ago. I believe he was here even before I came over, and that has been about 13 years ago. And time flies. But he's doing a great job for us, and he's treating his staff accordingly, and we're happy with the selection that we made. Also, to let you know that Nick Martino, our